Alrighty, so we've gone through the learning objectives. Now it's time for a bit of background. So I'm sure I don't need to tell you that the current system is a bit of a mess and it's got us into serious trouble. So at Assemble, we believe that the way to upgrade our democracy so it's fit for the 21st century and the challenges we face is to put assemblies at the heart of how we make decisions. So assemblies, they genuinely put the voices of citizens at the center. And that's why they actually come up with solutions that most people actually want. Because at the end of the day, we all kind of know what's best for our communities when we get together and have a structured discussion about what we need to do. Okay, so what is an assembly? It's an open get together. The welcome talk. I'm sure I don't need to go into this. It's a structured way of making decisions as a community. Okay, so next is the strategy. And it might get a little bit more complicated here. So bear with. So what we're focusing on is people's councils. Basically, a people's council is just a word we're using for an assembly that is independent from your local council. Okay. And this assembly is just a group of people from your area getting together and deciding that they want to make decisions for themselves. And this assembly produces a couple of things. It produces a charter of 5 demands, which is basically a fancy way of saying they come up with 5 things that they make demands of to the council. They also identify people to stand in council elections. So if you've got an election happening near you, you'll have your assembly, which is running. And when it gets closer to the time of the election, your assembly will put someone forward for the council elections. And in addition to that, they'll also come up with a list of things that they actually want the candidate to do. So it's actually representing what the people's council want. And then finally, it's also generating some energy for collective action. So collective action, what is it? It's people coming together and making a stand on the issues that they care about. So say, for example, the local council says, we're going to make a load of cuts to childcare in the area. The People's Council, your assembly, gets together and they make a decision together. What do we want to do about the proposed cuts to childcare? That's just an example. Okay, so I'm going to roll on a few more slides. If you've got any questions, if you could just note them down so we have a record of them and we can come back to them. Okay, so next slide. So with Assemble, we're not just interested in the local level, these people's councils, in other words. We're also keen to, we're also interested in how this can all fit into a national picture, which can have cut through at the national level for national policy. So when these people's councils get together across the country, they come up with a load of issues that they want the House of the People, which is the national body, to discuss. And they also select a couple of people at random who came to one of the People's Council's assemblies, and they send them to this national get-together, the House of the People, right? So the House of the People is just basically a big assembly, like a bigger version of the People's Council, and they discuss the issues, for instance, high energy bills in this example, that come up in the people's councils. All right. So hopefully in this way, you can see how the local assemblies feed into this national assembly on the bigger, on the national level. Okay. And this House of the People is kind of set up as a bit of a rival to the House of Lords. So Assemble is one of many organizations campaigning to replace the House of Lords with a permanent assembly. Okay, we're calling it House of the People. Other organizations call it the House of Citizens. And other organizations have put a lot of work and time and research and energy into imagining how precisely this House of the People or House of Citizens could function. And I'll share a report with you at the end, which has the very detailed mechanisms, how the people rotate, how frequently they rotate, how it interacts with the House of Commons, etc., etc. But until the point when it replaces the House of Lords, what it's doing is making demands of national government. It's also generating the will for collective action, just like the people's councils were. So in the same way, the people's councils, people got together and spoke about funding cuts. The House of the People can do the same. But this is as much about a publicity campaign. In other words, launching this campaign that can draw attention to this need to replace the House of Lords with some form of assembly, whether it's a House of Citizens, a House of the People, is besides the point. But essentially, it's also as much about drawing attention to the need to replace it. Okay, so these are the areas where we're currently meeting organizers to start the process of organizing a people's council in their area. So you might think, okay, why have they picked these areas? And the reason is that during the general election, we worked with 28 independent candidates who ran assemblies as part of their campaigns. So it's slightly different to what we're doing now. But they were candidates who basically believed that politics is broken and we need to fundamentally upgrade it. And they're interested in working with us after the election now. And it's taken a few months to kind of to rally them, but they're all brought round to this message. So these will be areas where there'll be action happening over the coming months. Okay, so I just want to pause now for questions. And while I do that, I'm also just going to pause the recording. Okie dokie. So we've been through the strategy. Now it's a question of how to get started in your area. So if it is the case that you have a group of people around you and you think, okay, this is something we can actually get rolling, then you can take these steps to kind of get started, essentially. So you start with a briefing, and that's basically a group of people that you get together. Let's say 12 to 15 people would be a good number, and Assemble sends up someone to give a kind of basically the spiel, the vision, values, who we are, what we're about, what's the point of all of this. After that, you're building up to a launch event. So a launch event is, you could think of it as a kind of an interesting cultural hook, right? And what I mean by that is it's not about politics. It's not about democracy. It's about having fun, right? Because unlike us, I think we're probably a bit weird in that sense. Most people don't like coming to events that are about democracy or about politics. So if you can get some local musicians or something to kind of pull people in, a DJ, and then sprinkle a bit of politics on top and organize have an assembly at the end. So we had one of these events recently in Birmingham on the 21st of September. And it was just that. It was called the People's House Party. So that's the idea behind that, is you're drawing people in, getting them engaged, and then those people will be the people who are then organizing the People's Council, the assembly, afterwards with you. Okay, so you're bringing people on a bit of a journey, amassing more and more volunteers who are interested in taking part, and then you go in for the People's Council. All right. So next, I'm going to talk about what a briefing looks like, and then after that, what a launch event looks like. But for this training, I'm not going to talk about what a People's Council involves, how to organize that. And the reason for that is because it would just be too overwhelming, I think. So there's a separate training, which I'm putting together with a couple of other people, which should be ready in a couple of weeks. And the reason why it's been slow to get going is because most places, they're still involved in, putting on their launch events, their briefings, and they haven't started with the People's Council stuff. Okie dokie. So organizing a briefing. Okay. So as I said, this is getting a group of people together. You'd do very well if you got this many people as in the photo. But the more people, the better. What I've done is I've broken it into stuff that you and your team are responsible for and stuff that we can do from our side. Okay. So from your side, it's a case of choosing a date, finding and booking a venue, promoting the briefing, and talking to local community organizations as a part of that, promoting the briefing. So you want to go beyond your local WhatsApp networks and trying to, get people in the room who are, beyond your immediate network. And from our side, we can create an online event, provide email templates, call anyone in your town or city on the national database. And that is the national database that we have. So we can see who's nearby and call them up. We can also set up a live stream for the event. So if people can't make it in person, they can watch that. And we can also provide a support person to come and actually deliver that event for you. Alrighty. So after that, you can organize a launch event. And this photo is of a launch event that we organized in London. It was actually a kind of House of the People launch. So it was kind of the launching of this campaign, basically, for the House of the People on the national level to replace the House of Lords. Okay, so a launch event in your area, what this will look like is making the agreement with Assemble and receiving funds. That's completely dependent on how much we have in the bank account at that point in time. It's a case of choosing a date for it. Obviously, you can set up working groups for planning. So you might have a logistics little working group, a music working group, catering working group, for example. It's finding potential venues and availability. And most importantly, it's promoting the event. It's also important to set a regular date for the first assembly / People's Council, as it's called, to take place. And you want that to happen ideally a couple of weeks after, right? So from our side, we'll deal with some of the mundane stuff like venue booking, creating an online event page, providing event templates, calling anyone in your town/city on the national database again, live streaming it, and providing a support person again.